3, 2, 1.
Landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Liftoff and the clock has started.
Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
The final liftoff of Atlantis on the shoulders of the space shuttle. America will continue the dream.
Hi, I'm Dottie Metcalf-Lindenburger, retired NASA astronaut, mom of a 14-year-old, and a geologist at Geosyntech Consultants, and also a former high school teacher for the Vancouver School District. I attended Space Academy in April of 1990. And that was just an amazing time. So what do I remember the most about my time at Space Camp? Well, I remember first coming in, and this was a big deal. It was my first time to fly by myself on an airplane. So I thought it was great that people met me at the airport there in Huntsville because I was a bit nervous. I remember taking the bus into camp and being really excited, but also a little bit nervous to meet new people. And then just right away, bonding with my roommates and having a lot of fun with them. I remember spending probably too much time up at night, but just wanting to make those friendships. And then during the day, I loved things like, I remember building our rockets and launching those. And I especially remember the simulations. My first time I was on the mission control team. And so I was working with weather and different decisions that need to help the flight director decide if we could, launch the vehicle and then help out during the mission. What I remember for my second simulation is that I was a scientist on board the vehicle, and I had a chance to do some experiments. And then also I remember getting to do a spacewalk, and it was so awesome to get to do the spacewalk. We were kind of working around the payload bay of the space shuttle. And I distinctly remember that at some point I forgot to click back on my tether, and I ended up floating away in space. That was not good. And that was just a reminder that there's all these safety checks that we make, and those are really critical and important for real spacewalks. So that was this really special time. And then, of course, one of the big things that was happening in April of 1990 was NASA was launching the Hubble Space Telescope into space. And so we talked a lot about that because it's going to be at the end of April of 1990, and I was at camp in April of 1990. So this mirror that we were talking about, there was a whole display at Space Camp, and it was just really interesting to me and fascinating. And then, of course, later as a high school teacher, I would use the images from Hubble to get my own students excited about space and to talk about all the stages of life cycles of stars, and to just think about black holes and nebula and what's the difference there, and in our own solar system, understanding that as well. So Hubble was just really important, and I started understanding about the significance of Hubble when I went to Space Academy. What part of my training or career development do you think best prepared me for the role as an astronaut? Well, it's very critical that all astronauts have a background in science, whether that's being an engineer or having a math and science background. You'll see a range of different experiences in astronauts, but everyone has some sort of career and training and educational training in science and engineering. And so I was a geologist. I studied and had the opportunity to do internships, and those pieces were important for my training. But also, of course, the other piece for me was that I was trained as an educator. I went back to school after having graduated as a geologist and got my teaching certification. And so when in 2004, they hired teachers as part of the astronaut class, of course, having that teacher specific training as well as being a scientist was important for my role to become an astronaut. And then I was an athlete, and astronauts have to be very physically fit. And so my time as a cross-country runner, both in high school and then in college, and as a track athlete, that paid off as well. And I could put in the extra physical training that is needed for being an astronaut. When trainees arrive at space camp, they are assigned to a team of 12 to 16 trainees. Can you talk about the importance of training together with that team, the support of the more veteran teams, and how that helped you prepare for your time in space? Well, the same way as space camp trainees coming in and having different ranges of ages and experiences and science backgrounds, the same is true for astronauts. We come in as astronaut candidates. We cannot fly in space until we've done at least 1.5 to 2 years of training. And that's important because there's a common language that is needed at NASA to be able to talk to each other when you're in space, to know when to elevate problems, how to trap any problems and make sure that you don't make major mistakes. Again, we talked about the safety and my safety tether. That's a significant early thing that you learn in EVA training so that you won't float away. And so those come up as reminders. But the great thing about the way NASA builds teams and the way NASA builds the teams that are going to launch into space is that, of course, there will be veteran astronauts with rookie or brand new astronauts. And so we work together as a team and we learn from each other. We can ask questions of those with more experience, and we can watch them as models. You know, I watched people do spacewalks before I got into the pool and did them myself. Of course, when we were doing simulations, we would have an experienced astronaut doing the simulations with us. So we're learning the way they talk to the mission control, the way they prioritize the problems that are coming up during the simulation. Some things aren't as big of a deal as other things, and they can recognize that. So watching them, and then that helps you as the new astronaut think about how you're going to prioritize and work the simulations. And then eventually when you get to space, you get to watch your veteran astronauts as they're already adapted to moving around, and you are just the brand new person, and everything is awesome and incredible, but also you want to do a really good job. And so you can watch your more experienced colleagues, and that really comes through. So we see trainees come to space camp from being little to big, and those experiences, when they come back for the second or third time, of course they can share with those that are brand new. I only had the opportunity to go to Space Academy once, but for some that get to return multiple times or that live in the area, that's awesome. They have a great job at being a leader and being a mentor to those that are new and coming on board, and that is very similar to how astronauts train. What is the most memorable part about my shuttle mission and time on orbit? Well, I'm struck with many memories. The beauty of the Earth as you look down on it for the first time, and then multiple orbits thereafter. I'll never forget seeing significant geology locations. One of my favorite was getting to see the Rift Valley in Eastern Africa, and just the colors, and as a geologist knowing that those plates are dividing. It was an incredible moment. Also, I love the moment I picked out Crater Lake and then could figure out all the volcanoes in the Cascade Range. And I knew where Vancouver, Washington was, which is where I'd been teaching when I found out I was an astronaut. I knew where my friends and family in the Pacific Northwest were. And during that same orbit, we came across the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains where my parents are in Fort Collins, Colorado. And then we came out across Texas where my husband and daughter were at the time. And I could just find all those places. So that will always stick with me as a huge memory of my time in orbit. But another big piece, I mentioned the spacewalks. I didn't personally go outside and do a spacewalk, but I was the backup and I was the intravehicular crew member, which means I spoke to our astronauts when both of them were outside for all 3 spacewalks. And so I'll always remember those times because it's a big day. Spacewalk day is a huge day. And it's really critical in all the safety checks and just being with the crew members, talking them through what they're doing, and making sure that they're safe and that, you know, when there's a moment to appreciate the beauty of the earth, they can take that while something else is being solved. But every moment that they're out there is critical. And so just that's the ultimate teamwork. And I really, really enjoyed that. What are the most common questions you hear about going to space? Well, of course, everyone wants to know how you go to the bathroom in space. And that was the question that ultimately launched my career, because one of my students asked that question. And in doing the research to find out how exactly the space shuttle toilet worked, then I found out they were hiring teachers as part of the class of 2004. So of course that that question is one of my favorite questions. And because also it means that we can get to exploration. The way that we recycle urine and wastewater on orbit is not much different than how we do it here on Earth, although it is really, really clean in space, obviously. But of course, we have water cycles here on Earth, and of course, we have wastewater treatment plants, and your wastewater doesn't just go down the toilet and disappear, right? And so there is a whole process for making sure that the people downriver or you know, wherever you live, that those things get treated so that people don't get sick. And that's really important. And the same thing, of course, then for our astronauts. But in space, water is a significant resource, and it's a limiting resource, right? It's really expensive to launch water when you could launch other things to space, including crew members. And so if you can reuse urine, which we are able to, and we can also reuse sweat and that water vapor that you breathe out, and recover that, treat it, and then allow it to be used as tomorrow's coffee or juice. That's really important. And we need that as we get ready to go back to the moon, and then as we look on to Mars, because of course, while there is the potential to get water on those surfaces, it will be expensive to extract. So you'll want to protect that resource and be able to recover it and not have to keep mining for it or using processes that would be really expensive to extract it. So I'm really glad that question was asked. And it's just, like I said, from the, well, how does it exactly work, to the scientific piece of it, which is really important for exploration. It's a great question. What are my thoughts about America's renaissance in space and what is going on right now? Well, I think we're in really exciting times. It's interesting to see how each of these different companies figures out new ways to launch people to space, how they are recovering their own stages so that they can be reused. There's just a lot of different thought. There's a lot of ingenuity. I think it's very exciting times. And you see the public becoming excited about it, watching these launches. They too wonder what tourists are going to do, or what these new astronauts are going to experience. And it maybe makes them think about, well, what would it be like if I went as well? So I think we're in exciting times. It also means that people have to think about, again, their stewardship and what it means for them to launch into space. Is it just for tourism? Are they going to do science? You know, each person has different answers to this. And when they come back, what will they do with that experience? Will they also share with young people? Will they make big changes to life here on Earth? I think that's still to be seen, and it leaves room for a lot of energy and enthusiasm. Given the chance to return as an Artemis astronaut, would you be excited about an opportunity to go to the moon? Well, if I still worked at NASA and I had not retired, I think it would be very exciting to know that we want to put women and minorities on the surface of the moon. There is a lot to still understand on the surface, from the geology that I'm of course curious about, but also just the engineering and working on a surface that has less gravity, and also that it, has limited resources and resources that we have to protect in order to live there. So it's again, this is really exciting times. It's going to take a lot of teamwork. It's going to take international work, and I'm glad to watch and cheer on those that will be returning, especially women and minorities that will get that first chance to land on the moon. For all those who have been inspired by their time at space camp or are hopeful future trainees, and those who want to become astronauts or part of the human spaceflight community, what is my advice for them? Well, the awesome thing about coming to space camp is that it sparks an interest, and it gives you a real insight into how the pipeline works. How do you become an astronaut? Or how do you become a part of the space community? That is what I really took away, besides the friendships and the understanding of Hubble and just the excitement of having been in simulations. But what really struck me was I finally knew a pathway to becoming an astronaut. And that hadn't been so clear when I had just talked with guidance counselors or other people that knew I was interested in space. Now it's a little bit easier nowadays because of course of having the internet, and there's so many people that can post their stories up, but that wasn't as clear when I was a young woman, and that was one of my big takeaways. And I really think that's still a big part of what space camp does. So whether you're a little kid attending the first time with your family, or you've gone through one of the camps from elementary school through high school, or if you're coming back as a parent or an educator, there's just so many parts along the way that can help you understand how we do work in the aerospace community, how there's more and more opportunities. It's not just going to be launching through government assets, but there's going to be companies that you can work at, that you can innovate at and be part of the aerospace community. Or like I said, you could even become a space tourist. So those are all the things that I hope that trainees take away and take back to their community, and also take into their future. How exciting. And any last advice I would give? Well, the biggest piece of advice that I would give is to always be curious. It was curiosity that got me to Space Academy. It was curiosity that helped me look up that answer to the question about how do you go to the bathroom in space? And it's curiosity that makes every day interesting to me. So always be curious, and don't be afraid to work hard. When I was at space camp, I told you those days were long, and I stayed up at night too. And I remember being tired, but it was because we were working hard. I remember filling out my notebooks and taking lots of notes during lectures, and then also really enjoying the simulations and the activities we were doing. The same was true when I went back to the classroom. I worked really hard, and I also did that as an athlete. When I became an astronaut, I again had to work hard to pass all of the practical training and all the written training tests, and then to ultimately be a part of a crew and an active crew member. Hard work isn't bad. I actually love it. It's what makes life also interesting. But don't be afraid to do it, because anything that's worth doing is going to need that hard work. And then lastly, I would hope that you do something that brings you joy, or that you are passionate about. So I've always been passionate about science, whether I was doing it, whether I was teaching about it, or now where I'm trying to inspire others to continue in the pathway of doing science, but also like I said, I'm a geologist and I'm working to conserve the resources we have here on Earth and make sure that one of the things we continue to have is clean water. So be passionate about what you do, enjoy the experiences and the people that you work with, and you will have a long and fulfilling life no matter what you end up doing. And I hope that you will shoot for your big dreams because there's so many opportunities now for you. That would be my biggest advice. So have a great Alumni Fest. I'm sorry I cannot be in personal attendance, but I'm there with you in spirit. Take care.
From concept to first flight, the dream of aviation has captivated humankind for centuries. It has inspired us to take risks.
Roses to Amelia and the plaudits of the world that have shown the way for aviation's progress.
To break boundaries.
For the first time, a man has flown an airplane faster than the speed of sound.
And to go further than previously thought imaginable.
Roger, Discovery, welcome home.
Since 1990, people from all over the world have come to Aviation Challenge in Huntsville, Alabama, in pursuit of that dream.
For the first time, it gives the youngsters of today the opportunity to find out what it really takes to become a top pilot, what kind of training one has to go through. And of course, that includes exciting flights and high-speed simulators.
For 30 years, these dreamers have been put to the test, asked to push beyond their limits to discover confidence, leadership, and bravery through teamwork. Born out of space camp and the legacy of the early American astronauts daring exploits as aviators, Aviation Challenge continuously inspires new generations, creating the aviators of today and tomorrow.
You're not just flying simulators, you've got survival training, and you learn like the academics around flying as well.
Aviation Challenge does a great job of teaching discipline in a supportive way, which is what I really love. It just makes you feel like you're on the right path.
It is these aviators, and others like them, who will influence future dreamers to seek out Aviation Challenge, propelling Aviation Challenge forward and allowing it to continue cultivating dreams for years to come.
Welcome, everyone. This is Beth Mund, and it's my honor to host this panel of women in STEM. I have with me some pretty terrific women, and all of us, and each of us, started our adventures in STEM at Space Camp. So I want to go ahead and get right into it. We're going to introduce each one of us one by one. I would love to start with you, Gretchen. Can you tell us let's start with your Space Camp experience and what age you were when you attended and how much fun you had.
Yeah, that's the best part. I'm Gretchen Green. I first went to Space Camp in 1986, where I think the ratio was something around the numbers of 12 girls and 144 boys. So yeah, that was about right, I think, for that time period. So I did Space Camp, and that actually, of course, as we know, that was the year of the Challenger disaster that had happened earlier that year. And it was very much top of mind during that camp experience, both as an example of the fact that the world was opening up to people, who were not the typical path to go into space. It was just the beginning and so exciting, and yet a stark reminder of all the challenges that we still faced. 1988, I went to Academy Level 1. And then in 1991, I went to Academy Level 2. I then returned as a crew trainer in college, and then subsequently went to family camp around 2016 with my son.
That is so cool. We have a very similar path, attending and then counseling. And then I went back with my family. What was it like to see Space Camp through your son's experience?
It's always a mixed bag whenever you try to pass along those traditions that you love to your next generation. Whether it's for me skiing at a certain ski resort and showing my son, oh, this is my favorite place to eat pizza. It's the same and yet it's totally different. So this is a different era. I went in the shuttle era. Now we're in a totally different era. We are aspiring to go to other worlds, go to Mars and beyond. So I think the scope of our goals is different, even though we always had those goals throughout the history of space exploration, knowing we were going to go farther. And so it's been wonderful to see him applying some of those skills he got from Space Camp, but with even a broader view of what science and math can encompass than what I think we had an appreciation for back in mid 80s.
So how old was he when he attended?
He was 8.
Oh, perfect. That's really great. Well, that's wonderful. That's what a special gift for a mom and a son to share that Space Camp experience. When we come back, I want you to tell us how you discovered Space Camp. Was it a brochure? Was it through the movie? I can't wait to talk to you about that. But first, I want to also introduce and start with Rebecca. Welcome to the panel. And please tell us when you first discovered and when you attended Space Camp.
Well, thank you. Really excited to be here with all these really fabulous women. So my name is Rebecca Torzone. Let's see, I was turned on to Space Camp back when I was in the 2nd grade. Which was a long time ago at this point. And I wanted to go, but my parents were like, no, sorry, that's really expensive. You need to save your money. And I think they had a concept in their head that this was a fleeting idea and it would go away. So that was their way of just delaying it, to be really honest. And I did exactly that. I saved my money. I babysat, I shoveled snow, I saved my money. The deal they made was that if I saved enough to go to Space Camp, they would pay for my airline ticket. Wow. So I did that. It took a long time, and I ended up going in 1989, and then I loved it so much, I went back in 1990 and 1991. So I did Space Academy 1, Space Academy 2, and Aviation Challenge. And a lot like Gretchen, although I didn't do the counselor part of it, I too brought my son and my niece back to family camp a number of years ago. And that was super fun, because for me, that was like 25-ish years between when I had gone and then to experience it with them. And, kind of to your question about what was it like sort of watching from his eyes, I'll reverse it a little bit. He got to see me sort of in my passion, right? I mean, he only sees me as mom. And it was like halfway through the weekend, he's like, Mom, seems like you're having like real fun and not just mom fun. This is literally what he said to me. And I said, well, I am. I mean, this is like, I'm in my element, So it was really fun for him to see that side of me and maybe why I'm so passionate, because he probably doesn't see that every day when I'm homework and picking up his room. So
that's so great.
Yeah,
that's so great.
For me, it just, Space Camp, it launched me. I always say that I think prior to going to Space Camp, I wasn't among my people. And I went to Space Camp and I figured out there was this whole world that were like me and that I wasn't this freak. And so going back, I just had this air of confidence about, I'm really glad I'm passionate about this thing. And so I've just held tightly to that for all these years.
Oh, perfect. I love that. Also, mom's not cooking, mom's not cleaning, mom's in her element, and mom's really smart. And
although I will say he fired me. So he was the mission control director. And I think Capcom in one of our missions. And I was like, with my phone, like recording him, because he was so cute with his little thing on and reading a script. He literally stops. And he's like, excuse me. He's like, when you go to work, do you take pictures and recording of your boss? I was like, no, that's weird. He's like, then why would you do it here? And he said, you're fired.
Busted.
Space Camp counselor is like, no, you can't actually fire her.
Oh,
it was super funny.
Oh, and again, what a gift. I love these stories because it really shows that there's a connection, and sometimes it's generational to this experience that's really for all ages, right? Oh my goodness, but we have to introduce Caroline. Welcome to the panel. When did you attend Space Camp and how did you learn about it?
Yeah, so I didn't attend Space Camp. Rebecca actually told me about it. So I've heard about it a couple times. It sounds so cool. But yeah, I did not attend, but man, I wish I had.
Not yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Not yet.
There you go. Yes, I would love to. I wish
Come
I had a
on
family
down.
to go back.
Yeah, it's not far. Come on down. If you did attend Space Camp, and now that you know a little bit about the program, what position on the mission crew would you enjoy? Like a mission specialist, a payload specialist, pilot commander? Any preferences?
Man, pilot commander sounds really cool. So maybe pilot commander, but
Yeah.
also payload specialist. I think that would align more with what I do now. So I don't know.
Well, let's continue and talk about how you got into the STEM field. Was it always through your classes at school, or was there something that opened the door for you that really showcased for you what's available in this industry?
Yeah. So I one of my sort of thoughts around, coming to this panel was about how, my access to STEM had impacted my career path, right? So I think, at least in my school district, I was sort of at the beginning of this big push for STEM. So I remember the first STEM day that we had in maybe middle school or high school, where it was basically career day, but everybody has a STEM career. And neither of my parents are really in STEM, so I didn't really have that exposure at home. So having a STEM day like that, where I got to go see people who were engineers, who I was like, you know what an engineer is, but you really don't know what an engineer is. And there are so many different types of engineers and scientists. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I love math, and science is cool. And I can do something with it. And that's awesome. I don't have to do the same job as my mom or the same job as my dad. I can do something different. And that was really awesome.
Perfect. So let's all of us, in each of us, explain what we currently do briefly and introduce the audience and listeners to what our job is in the STEM field. Gretchen, would you mind going first?
Sure. I'm a radiologist, so I'm a physician. I have an MD and also a Master's of Medical Science degree. I went to Brown in the 8-year medical program, which was undergrad, then 4 years of medical school. I then did an internship in internal medicine, and then 5 years of radiology training, including a fellowship in women's imaging. So I always like to joke that Halloween is my favorite holiday because everybody gets to wear skeletons. And so it's the one day when I get to wear my skeleton costume and everyone can see what my insides look like instead of the other way around. So my job is to use all kinds of energy and different techniques, whether it's sound waves, magnetic resonance imaging, or x-rays, to see into people's bodies and then help other doctors understand what's wrong with them and how to help treat them. My specialty in particular is breast cancer. So,
wow. Thank you for what you do. Earlier this year, I had the privilege to go on an analog mission to Poland, where right before I got to check in with my team, I had a few days and I went to Marie Curie's childhood home. So was she a hero of yours? And who are some other mentors that you really looked up to, maybe that invited you into the field?
Yeah, I always wanted to be a doctor, but I didn't know about radiology. So when I was 2, I told my parents I was either going to be a doctor or an elevator operator. That was it. It was just a decision point, and it was all I ever.
Wait. You're so focused. You're 2 years old, and you've already know that it's either one of these. Was there something about buttons that was intriguing in the elevator?
Yeah, I think you get to make machinery work. People tell you what they want. You push some buttons. It does. You're asking it, and you go up and down, and you get people to their destinations.
Oh my gosh, you were so driven at two. Okay, so as you went through school, was there something specific that started to draw you into this field of study?
I just knew I was going to be a doctor, but I didn't know what kind really until I got to college. And then I started thinking I was going to go into emergency medicine. So I moved some electives around so I could be better positioned for it. I worked as an EMT, really thought I knew what I was, really going for. I wanted to do some wilderness medicine, and it all fit part of my goals. And then I took radiology as an elective, and I remember doing this slide deck that you had to, the old fashioned slide carousels with cassette tapes. Okay, that's how old I am, folks.
Oh.
But you would advance through the slides and the narration would say, and next we'll learn about X-rays. And I got bitten by the bug. I had no idea that we could use technology to see different tissues in the human body, all the physics and science that went behind it. I had no idea going into radiology that I would have to pass 3 separate boards exams, including the first one on radiation physics. Physics was a really hard course for me. I had to go to every extra office hour. I did every extra assignment. I just had to put the pedal to the metal to do well. And it was a good thing because later when I had to take those boards, then I knew I could just work really hard and push through it. Fortunately, I was successful with that. So it's just the field of study that has held my interest and has continually been fascinating to me as everything continues to change and get better over time. I think that's something we don't realize as we enter a field, we expect it to be what we think we know. But all these STEM fields, a lot of them are characterized by growth and evolution. And that's actually part of the best example of why it keeps me motivated and learning is that it's always getting better and more interesting.
So well said. Thank you. And, in the future in space exploration, we're going to need a lot of radiology studies so we can understand the effects it has on us as we go and the living things that we're going to be bringing when we go out and settle the new worlds. Let's go now, please. Rebecca, can you tell us a little bit about your work and perhaps some folks along the way that influenced you or invited you into your STEM field?
Sure. So I work at Northrop Grumman. I always say Northrop Grumman and Caroline, don't tell anybody this. It's my plan B. Plan A in my career, I wanted to be an astronaut. And so much like Gretchen, I wasn't 2, but I was in the 2nd grade when, I got bit by the space bug and I just fell in love with it. And that's what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, along the path, NASA changed their height requirements. And while you can't tell, I'm only 5 feet tall, but they increased it to 5'2", and it wasn't waivable. And so I took a step back from that dream. And at the time I had already, went into industry, and that was my way of both gaining additional education as well as experience on my road to what I thought was going to be NASA and being an astronaut. But it turns out, my STEM education gave me all these great choices that while plan A didn't work out, I have a great career at Northrop Grumman, and I've worked on everything. So I grew up as an engineer in the company, and I've worked on everything from some space things like Caroline, to some radars, to battle command kinds of things. I've done some cold fusion, superconducting electronics kinds of things.
Wow.
And now I'm the vice president of a business unit called Missile Products. And so it's a multi-billion-dollar business unit in which I build, rocket motors and propulsion solutions. I build fuses and warheads and a bunch of ammunition programs. So I really feel very proud of being able to lead that team because that's all about providing, our nation's security and our warfighters and all of that. But, I've joked a lot in my career about, well, it's not really rocket science, right? And now I literally am doing rocket science career, so it's pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff. Yeah. So
very cool.
So, I just think, and it was for me, Space Camp, which really led to where I went to college because my counselor at Space Camp said, oh, you got to go to Embry-Riddle. And I started studying Embry-Riddle, and that's where I went to college. And I got a degree in engineering, and I went on to get 2 master's degrees after that. But it gave me choices, right? So when plan A, which so often happens to us in careers and life, doesn't work out, I had choices for plan B, and I hope for plan C someday, I'll have other choices.
Right.
And your question about, mentors along the way, again, I'll kind of take the opposite. Maybe I've had different experiences, but I had some folks along the way that actually told me that I couldn't do it. And for me, that really fueled my fire. In particular, I had a calculus teacher in high school. I was doing very well in calculus, like getting an A in his class. And when he learned that I wanted to go on to be an engineer and an astronaut, he says, well, you realize that takes a lot of math. Almost as if I wasn't intelligent enough to do it. And I said, well, of course I know that. Like, I think I'm doing okay, right? And then actually I went in for my senior counseling meeting, with my senior class counselor, what are you going to do with your career? And I had it all mapped out exactly what I was going to do. He literally kind of pokes his nose over the desk and he says, well, have you ever considered being a flight attendant?
No.
And no, I have no issues with flight attendants. It's a great job. It's a great career, but it's not an astronaut.
Right. Such a thing to say.
I had nothing to say, right? I literally just said, I'm sorry, I don't think you understood anything I just said. But the good news is that fueled my fire. Like, I'm going to show these guys who think I can't do it, that I can do it. And that's what I did. And so, well, I've had a ton of people encourage me along the way and mentor me and guide me and all that. But it's in particular those two folks, because I often think if I would have been the person to back down, which I think so often can happen, especially to young people, where would I have ended up? Where would I be? I wouldn't be on this panel tonight with you all, So that's why I think I'm passionate now about young people and how much we need to encourage them and pull them. And even if they struggled in math, who cares?
Especially.
So many things to do, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So anyway, that's my story.
Wonderful. And just to revisit your A plan and maybe Gretchen's as well, and perhaps maybe even mine, and I can't speak for Caroline yet, but Dr. Cyan Proctor is twice rejected by NASA and in her 50s going to space. So maybe an A plan is still very much on the docket.
And look at
us.
Especially
those of us who went, right? Especially those of us who went to space camp, who we can say, we've already done that. We're totally qualified.
Now, I will say that my business has been doing a little bit of business with Blue Origin. And so I recently told my contracts team, if you could just write it into the contract, if we're going to take some work from them, that I get a free ride to space. I said, I'm on board.
Right. There's plan A again. It keeps appearing. It's still there. Oh, that's wonderful. All right. Caroline, you had something that perhaps we did not, which was the STEM day at school. I never had that. Was that part of your journey that opened the door that got you started in your career? And tell us what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a systems engineer at Northrop Grumman, and I work for their space sector. So I'm focused entirely on the space side of things. I'm actually in the payload and ground systems, and generally more in the payload side of things. So I would say that the STEM day definitely helped. I think it just gave me that access and exposure to it that I really wouldn't have gotten otherwise. But I mean, I've always loved school. I'm like a huge math nerd. So I think I really got interested in STEM and actually doing STEM as a career when I took AP Calculus in high school. And thankfully, opposite of Rebecca, I had a really stellar math teacher in high school who was just really encouraging. And he was just really good at making math, tangible. Like finally, it felt like I just could grasp it. And I took it and ran. And I love math. I majored in college. My favorite part about math is all the theory stuff, which I think is what most people really hate, but I love to do a proof. There's nothing more exhilarating to me than stepping up to a chalkboard and proving a theorem. I think it's so cool.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm a huge math geek. I never knew that I would do space stuff, that I would go into this field. It just sort of fell in my lap. I actually was interviewing for a different role at Northrop Grumman as a software engineer in a different sector. And they were like, well, we think you'd be a really good systems engineer because you have this math background. And really the way that I see my job is, at least a lot of times, systems engineers are sort of given an idea and you have to kind of take it and solve the problem and build something that can, reach a solution for that. Which is what I really love about math. You start with a theorem and you have all of these things in your head that can build to a solution and you make it and you write it down on paper and then it becomes a thing and it's so cool. And so, I was interviewing for another job. They said, hey, maybe you could do systems engineering. And I was between a modeling and simulation group and the space group. And they're like, do you want to do modeling and simulation or do you want to be in the space sector? And I was like, space, give me space. That's really cool. So I ended up there and I think it's awesome. I mean, again, I don't have any background in it. So I feel like I'm learning something new every day and it's really cool stuff.
That's why you're going to be a perfect payload specialist at space camp.
Yeah, exactly.
You're already there. You'll know, you'll re-teach us the manual for space camp. Oh my goodness. This is fantastic. I want to ask next, what was a highlight in your entire STEM experience, something in the field that really made you say, this is incredible, or really influenced you or made an impression with you? We talked a little bit, of course, Caroline, your math class and some of the things that drove us. But if there's something specific, the more specific, the better, so that kids and students and folks maybe coming into this field can really hold on to an example or a case study, would be great. And then something that you would share with a student that is perhaps on the fence and is like, oh gosh, is STEM really for me? And maybe through your example, you can showcase for us that that's maybe the moment that it was, great for you, or a moment where you really enjoyed being in this field. I would love to hear. If anyone has their example ready, jump in.
Actually, I'll go again.
Go ahead.
So, again, one of the projects that I worked on last year, it ended up launching from Wallops Island. And even though I didn't get to see the launch, which was very sad, I did in the months that it was, basically we'd gone up on the Cygnus bus, which is a resupply mission to the International Space Station, and our payload wasn't doing anything up there. But when it came down to deorbit, as it was deorbiting, we got to do our mission. And so in January of 2021, earlier this year, I got to go to Dulles and sit in a mission control center. And, I'm sitting in this mission control room, and there's big screens in front of me. And, you have this diagram of how you're orbiting, and it's doing this cool wave up and down the Earth. And I was like, this is incredible. I just thought it was so cool. Like, it was so exciting that, a field that I never knew I would go into, that, I didn't really even see. Certainly I saw it's like kind of applicable, but I was like, what can I do with math here? Something that was just sort of so new to me could be so applicable to what I loved. And it was just awesome. And I think that my piece of advice for a student who's sort of on the fence about it is that STEM generally, it's 4 topics, right? Like you've got science, technology, engineering, and math. That's a lot of stuff. There's so much within that. So if you find something in STEM that you're interested in it, but maybe you're a little on the fence, keep exploring, keep looking. It's such a broad field in each one of those areas that you'll find something if you keep looking, and if you're interested in it, and if you're technically into it, if you like doing stuff and you like problem solving, just keep looking, and I'm sure that you'll find a place to land.
Yes, that's great. That's wonderful. And then, we've got to get you back to a launch so you can see it.
Yeah, right.
That's incredible. That's a great case study, a great memory. Gretchen, how about you?
The moment that I remember was lying on the floor when I was about to go to college, and I had the course catalog open in front of me. And I was lying on my stomach. I can remember vividly, lying there on the carpet in the living room and flipping through and saying, okay, what am I going to study? I have to pick my classes. What am I going to do? I got to do the pre-med stuff. Okay. But what else do I get to do? And I read the course description for neuroscience, the number 1 introductory course for neuroscience. And I thought, this is just the coolest thing I've ever heard. There's chemistry, there's biology, there's human science, there's some psychology and thinking, and it wrapped everything up with a bow. And I remember feeling the same thing that I think you just saw in Caroline, was this excitement, this energy, and the enthusiasm for doing it. And I felt that and realized, okay, if I'm going to pick something, and this is going to be hard, I have to pick this and keep this fire as long as I can and work it to its completion. I also knew that it was a bachelor's of science degree. It was an SCB or BS. And that was important because, as Rebecca talked about, that was a requirement for becoming an astronaut. So I was thinking to myself, okay, I just have to keep checking the boxes for everything I can until I can get to the point where I can throw my hat in the ring, but I'm going to keep all my options open. And so if I had advice to students, keep as many options open as you can keep as broad a mind as you can, looking at what else might be interesting. Is there a different angle, different field? What's a different situation or a topic that I might get interested in if I try it out? And don't foreclose too early, because it is very broad. There's a lot of different ways to do things. So
that's great.
Yeah, harnessing that energy and that enthusiasm, and yet having both the short, medium, and long-term goals is what will help you keep going when the going gets tough. And I think a lot of the time our brain is telling us, oh, I should quit. Like, this is too hard. I'm going to give up. I don't know if I can do it. I'm afraid I'm just not going to keep going, because what if I fail? But that's the very thing that you should do the most. The thing that you see is very hard, that means it's worth working for. Because if it was easy, everybody would do it. But it wouldn't mean a lot as an accomplishment for you or for the world. And so don't be afraid to reach for those really tall goals, those brass rings, and really look for the things that are hard and that challenge you, because that's what will help actually pull you through those tough learning experiences and keep going.
Wow. I love that. I can totally picture you sitting on the floor and finding that description, and then your face just lit up just talking about it, because it must have been not only a great class, but something that, started the whole journey for you. And thank goodness you were at a school that offered that. And some students, they don't always know where to start. So they just kind of start where the general classes are required. And some students take big, brave moves and find the hard thing in the catalog, like you did, and said, let's try it. Let's jump in and go. That's fantastic. Okay. Wow. So Rebecca, what are some of the things that you have really showcased in your STEM career that maybe had your moment that you want to share with some students that might be on the fence?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I went through this engineering program in college, and it's hard, kind of to Gretchen's point. It's hard. I had many moments along the way where I'm like, I can't do it. I'm done. But I didn't, and I continued. But it was my senior year in college that actually, at the time, NASA was working to sort of reinvigorate, I'll say, their reputation, post Challenger, post Columbia, right? Some things going on. And so they put out this basically request for proposal almost to college students. And you could build an experiment and then bring that experiment to Texas and fly on their Vomit Comet, their trainer for microgravity. So a group of us from college, we got an experiment together and we submitted it, and we were selected to go. So we got to go to Ellington for the entire week, and it was like a week of being an astronaut, right? We got to go into the pressure chamber. We got all sorts of training and briefings, and it was fabulous. We got to get our experiments ready, and you had to go through the inspection and all that, and then we finally boarded the flights. And so for 2 days in a row, I got to fly. And if anybody has ever done it, it's about a 3.5 hour flight. You do 42 parabolas. And for each parabola, you're weightless, I'm going to say, for about 20, 25 seconds at the top of the parabola. And it is so much fun. And for me personally, it sealed the deal that, I was on the edge anyway, because I felt like I really worked through college. And I was like, maybe I'm not really cut out for this, because I had to work really hard for it. But that sealed the deal, right? Because I could work with a group of people. I submitted a proposal. We did the experiment. We flew it. It was successful. And it was super fun along the way. And so for me, it was like all those elements sort of came to life for me. And so I had that moment. And then further in my career, I had a moment one time where I was actually teaching a class. I was an adjunct professor at a college, and a student of mine who happened to be in the Army was sharing a story about coming back from overseas and using a product that saved his life. Turns out the product that saved his life is the product that I worked on at work. And so it was like this connection. And I was like, I'm sorry, what product did you say?
Oh my gosh.
And I had this moment where, literally I was like, the student in my class is here because something I helped on to save his life. And it was in that moment that, I'm now in plan B in my career, but I realized, at least for me, that passion around, helping our nation's security, helping our warfighters. I have children now. I want to provide a safer place for them to live. and that I could be a part of that because of my technical background. And so for me, that sealed the deal on, well, yes, I was sad I couldn't be an astronaut. I have made a meaningful and I hope impactful career regardless of that. And
wow.
You know,
I have goosebumps just from your story. That's incredible. What an honor and gift to get that from your student. I mean, what are the odds?
It was just this aha moment, right? The fact that he was in my class, and anyways, it was fabulous. But,
oh my gosh, these are great case studies.
About what would you tell a student? And I think Gretchen really said it best about, choices and perseverance and all those things. But, the thing I would add to that is be you. I know it sounds kind of cliche or sometimes overused, but everybody has something to bring to the table. And what I bring is not what Gretchen brings, is not what Caroline brings, but it might require all three of us to get to the optimal solution for whatever we're working on. And the quicker you can just figure out what it is you're good at and stop trying to be good at the things that Caroline is good at and the things that Gretchen is good at, and just be you, the better you'll be and the better your team around you will be. And that comes sometimes with maturity, but comes sometimes with somebody just saying that it's okay to be you. And that means you may not be good at some things. You may even have some failures along the way, and how you pick yourself up in those moments and carry on will say a lot about you as a person. So that's my advice to young students.
Great advice. And a perfect segue into my next question. What are some things that you might see in your careers or in the career span that you've had that is in future trends of STEM? And please feel free to be very specific. So if in breast cancer radiation prevention is something, there's something new or upcoming or that you're working on, we'd love to hear more specific, the better, because there's going to be a lot of interested folks waiting to hear some more great examples. Or if there's just something in general and it can also be in space, it can be in pretty much any of these fields that if you're even excited about that hasn't even yet been on the horizon, jump on in and share what you think is going to be something really incredible in the future of this particular STEM field.
Yeah, to start out with medical imaging, the sky's not even the limit. The technology tends to get faster, clearer, smaller, more portable, and therefore it expands our reach in imaging, within the body and also into the world and beyond. So for me, it's easy to say, yeah, it's a field that has these nonlinear exponential opportunities for growth and improvement. What I have seen personally that I never would have predicted, though, is the ways that education in my life has really changed. So last year during the pandemic, I also do medical legal consulting work where I help educate lawyers in medical malpractice cases about what happened in cases and how we might use technology and information and literature to help inform, was the right thing done, or should something different should something have been done differently, possibly for a different outcome. So kind of an errors analysis or postmortem, if you would. And so I noticed there was a different intersection of need, that doctors, even in the midst of a pandemic, were being laid off from their jobs. I know this seems unbelievable, but 70% of doctors had either a pay cut or lost their jobs in many cases during the pandemic. Wow. And at the same time, many lawyers had time that they hadn't had before because courts were closed. So it was literally the perfect storm. The lawyers needed the doctors, but they were afraid to call because they thought we were all out saving everyone from COVID. And yet the doctors were looking for ways to expand their skills and education and also their financial ability to earn money outside of just purely clinical work. And so with this, I took the lead of a couple courses that I had taken through some digital portals. And I created a course to teach other physicians how to become expert witnesses and also do medical legal consulting. And so now, if you had asked me again a year ago, I would have said, no, that's crazy. A digital course, like, no, I'm a doctor and I do these things, I do technology. But this has opened up now a totally different world of ability to be an entrepreneur, business creation, education, new collaboration platforms. being able to interact with people on many different levels in the educational sphere in ways that we didn't do ever before is, I think, what will help us expand in the future in whatever field we apply it to. So if we can learn differently and better and collaborate in new ways, that's going to expand our abilities in ways that we can't even predict currently.
Wow. This is so interesting. I love this. I was just talking to my husband tonight about he's just starting to dabble into Bitcoin blockchain mining. And I was explaining to him that when I was also an adjunct professor, we were required by the school to teach 3 ways, to the visual learners, to the auditory learners, and then to the learners who prefer to read the material. But you had to present the information in all 3 different ways. And so it just made me think of STEAM, and STEM is really going to start to become science, technology, engineering, education, and mathematics. Because, I mean, what good is the advances and the innovations that we're making if we're not sharing and improving and paying it forward? That is fantastic. And who would have thought, you know, they say that crisis brings opportunity. So who would have thought that these, you know, unlikely pairs would be able to really benefit from each other? Because I bet in so many medical malpractices, it's truly a mistake. And then, you know, to be able to turn around and learn from it and grow, or to prevent that from happening, it needed a leader and a visionary like you to kind of step back and say, let's take a look at this. Let's share it with everyone. That's incredible. Wow. And hopefully, like, that's also what Space Camp in many ways can show students, that there is a place, a very safe place where you can fail and learn and enjoy that journey, and maybe even teach others. I mean, if you're really great at it, turn around and help the student next to you or the friend, or fire your mom when she's on the phone.
Exactly.
Anyone else want to share some of the trends that either they've seen or they would like to see in this field? Again, Gretchen, thank you. That's incredible and so specific. And I want to come to you for a course in the future that I want to take, because that's just, I would have never thought. And you definitely pointed out how that miscommunication or misinterpretation of what, you know, we thought the doctors were doing and the lawyers that have time, and both needing to be innovative. That's fantastic. Anything on the horizon?
I think several things, trends that I'm seeing are things I would like to see for sure. You know, one of the trends that I've seen in the workplace, and I love it, this is great, is it used to be sort of this traditional model of come into the industry, you know, be quiet, go to your cube, do your work, submit your work, and we'll come get you if we need you, right? And you're going to do that for so many years, and then you're going to maybe get promoted, and then you're going to do that and get promoted, right? And then it's like a long time in your career, way down the path, then you can be a leader and you can, right? That model has gone away. And I think this new model of, you know, our younger folks coming in direct from college, they very much have what I would call a seat at the table and a voice, and they participate and they contribute just as much, and in many cases more, than some of our very senior engineers or very senior technical folks. And watching sort of that trend of, you know, almost reverse mentoring or reverse knowledge management or knowledge transfer is super fun watching, right? When you take a young person just out of college who has learned all sorts of new techniques and digital techniques and new tools, teach somebody who's been in the industry for a long time who hasn't had that exposure, that is really powerful. And so we're seeing that, that you don't have to wait 30 years into your career to be a key contributor, that you may have something really important and really relevant on day number 1. So I think that's huge. I think number 2, the industry is sort of doing a reset. You know, all of this space travel is very much back on the horizon, right? There was this whole period of time where it was on pause and the country didn't really know what to do with it. And in some cases, NASA didn't want to take ownership and there wasn't really the commercial side. But now you see all of that sort of rebooted. And I hope, and I think it's going to rejuvenate interest in STEM from our young people, because we need that, right? We have fallen behind compared to other countries and other nations. and we need young people to want to go into STEM. So I'm really encouraged by that and very hopeful that that trend will continue. And when I equate that to what I do every day at work, you know, we have enemies in foreign countries who have put this kind of, you know, horsepower behind STEM for many years and decades where we have a lot of making up to do in that regard to really go continue to keep our nation and our warfighters safe. So we need people in these fields for a very long time.
So this recurring theme of education and enabling. I mean, I want to see more superhero women in the films and in the arts, and more women who, like Caroline, are just beaming and loving and enjoying their math journey. And let's be honest, there's not a lot of women in the field that that when you were perhaps going through school, you could point to and say, look at this mathematician, female, Nobel Prize. And they did exist, but there were just a few, and the names aren't widely known. So now that we have Caroline, she can tell us some other trends. So we've got education for sure as one of the great trends. What do you see, or what do you hope to see?
Yeah, and I'll say Rebecca's first point, you know, the table, and I think it's really cool. I'm really jazzed, but I love going to work every day because I feel like I'm doing something and I'm making a difference. And I hope that would be a motivator for students who are in STEM now, to know that that's a possibility. It really does feel like a different sort of environment than, I guess, what I was expecting. So that's awesome. And I agree with you, Rebecca. But I would say that sort of touching on the space side of things, something that people keep repeating to me at work, who have been in the industry for a long time, is that space really is kind of changing. I mean, it's gone from being this very traditional, very difficult and just long and expensive process of getting things into space and launching something. It's, you know, basically we've slimmed down what is traditionally a 10 to 15 year process or longer into maybe a few years, and it's much less expensive. So there's just a lot of stuff going into space, and it's getting smaller and faster and more powerful, and it's cool. And it's like, we're really at a turning point. And I think it's such an interesting field to be in right now, because it sort of feels like you're at this beginning of a new frontier, and you know, space is the final frontier, but man, it goes on forever. So like, it really is like the frontier. So I think it's super cool.
Yeah, that's great. I think, yes, while space is a final frontier, human beings and living things in space is a whole nother challenge. It's like there's planetary exploration and so many things that, you know, we're looking forward to doing, and we can do now with our robotics and going, like you said, faster and further. And my goodness gracious, please get James Webb Space Telescope up there like yesterday. Oh my word. If I hear one more delay, I think I'm going to run out into the street, into traffic, because right? We have all these incredible things. And I know that space is also hard and it's risky. But I think there's a place, as each of one of you have said, for everyone in this field. In the field of space exploration, there's many things that are needed, and there's many talents that are needed. So this is fantastic. And as we wrap it up, if you have anything else that you'd like to share, either about your personal experience in STEM, or something that you want to engage or invite, or you know, even if you're as bold as you want to share your contact information, or maybe how people can get a hold of you and ask some more questions about your journey specifically, please feel free, if you feel comfortable, to share. Otherwise, closing thoughts for students and interested folks that are looking to get back into this field, or perhaps get started in STEM.
I'm happy to jump in. You know, first of all, Beth, thank you for hosting. Thank you to Gretchen and Caroline. I mean, you both are fabulous women to be on a panel and discussion. And my contact information, happy to take questions. You know, I get a lot of students reaching out asking about college and courses and things like that. So my email is rebecca.torzone, just like my name, at ngc.com, like Northrop Grumman Corporation.com. So happy to field those questions. You know, I think final, you know, parting thoughts is, you know, everybody has something to contribute. And these are only 3 examples, but there are thousands of examples every day. And we don't know what we don't know about STEM, right? STEM is all about discovery and innovation and invention. So we don't know what's it going to look like in 10 years from now, and 20 years from now, when you think about where people could be living in the universe and not just on this earth. It's pretty exciting. And so we need you. Get educated.
Yes.
Come try it out is, the best advice I can give. But don't be afraid if you have a little bump in the road, get back on the horse.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. How about you, Caroline?
Yeah.
Closing thoughts?
I guess my closing thought would be sort of piggybacking on what Rebecca said, that this is just, it's a really cool field to get into. And I think that something that's important when we think about the future of STEM and of women in STEM is, from my personal experience, I think I probably did have a much different, entry into STEM than you might have in a different generation, where I actually feel like I was very supported, and I'm very grateful for that. And I have the utmost admiration and appreciation for all of you for paving that way for me and making it, a more open environment to the newer generation of women in STEM. And I think that it's important for us to remember that, different diverse backgrounds lead to different diverse ways of thinking, and new people and different people at the table when you're problem solving will only lead to more innovation. And so I think that as we consider the future of STEM, we want to make sure that it stays open. And I think bridging out and building pathways for others and other diverse groups of people to join the field, I think is really important. So I'm a huge advocate for people in STEM generally, but let's get some diversity in here. I think it'll be awesome.
Awesome. Yes, you are. We're so grateful that you came and joined us on this panel. And finally, Gretchen, your closing thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much, Beth, and all the members of the panel tonight. This has been great. I want to point out something that I think private enterprise has done especially well, is they have been driven by answering the question, how can we do this? And that's very different from asking, can we do it? And so whenever you're faced with something, the question is not, can I do it? Am I able to? It's how. So that one word makes all the difference. And don't believe that something is impossible just because we don't know that it can happen yet. And to Rebecca's story before, that she's 5 foot and therefore did not meet the adjusted height requirement, I didn't either until in my 40s. I had had spine surgery from a herniated disc, and I was actually told, don't run. It's going to hurt your discs. You will cause further damage. It's against medical advice, don't run. Well, I just got so busy in life and I needed to stay fit and I wanted to get stronger and faster and all these things. And so I felt like, well, the only thing left is to go faster and exercise more. So I'm going to start running. So I took up running, and I'm in my early 40s, and I actually have now grown over an inch, and I now meet the NASA height requirement. So doctors—
I'm going running, I gotta go.
Right? So doctors told me, don't do it. And I ignored the people who said no, and I did it anyway for my own reasons. And lo and behold, it's happened. So amazing things can happen that you never think are possible. And so never think that that one thing is simply not going to happen. Ask instead, but what if it's better than my worst fear? What if something could happen that would just blow my mind and be the most amazing outcome that I could imagine, rather than being stuck down in the fear? So when people are telling you things and they're saying, oh, like Rebecca was told, there's a lot of math. I think early on, you need to put a filter on that. You think to yourself, are you talking about you or me? Because the majority of time, people are talking about themselves. They're worried about themselves. They're thinking about their own perspective, but they may be saying the word you. So it sounds as though they are talking about you. The people who will help you the most are those who will spur you on and motivate you, sometimes by telling you can't do stuff. And the other ones who are maybe even more valuable are the ones who identify, as you had said, the things that make you, you. When someone can look at you and say, as I was told, you're not going to be an ER doctor. And I said, well, what do you mean? I said, okay, tell me something that happens in this part of the small bowel. And I rattled off 13 different things that occur. They said, see, that's why you're not an ER doctor. The ER doctor thinks, what's going to kill you in the next 5 minutes that I need to deal with? The radiologist thinks about those 13 things, looks at the small bowel and understands what is the most likely and makes a list of things that are more or less likely. That's how you think. You don't think like the other person. And so people like that who have that gift as teachers and mentors of identifying the things that really draw your strengths out, hold that very close and remember those things. Use the others to motivate you and fuel you. But again, don't write anything off, because the things we think are impossible, you'd be surprised. It's amazing.
Oh, that's phenomenal. I wrote that down. The how can I do it? And I'm even going to use that as a parent to my kids. Instead of asking, well, can you make the sports team or can you get a better grade? How can you work this problem through? And then you're putting the question back on them, the student, the child, the person, the medical, in person in training. How can you get there? Or for us, how can I get that seat on the next Inspiration 5 flight or whatever is coming up next, or Blue Origin or NASA? But clearly, okay, we have to run. We have to ask how.
I am going running. I'm taking it up, Gretchen. I used to be a runner, and I've never heard that before, but I'm going to try it. It better work.
Right?
Worked for me.
I love it. Well, this was just phenomenally fun. I know that there's so many great nuggets that each of us were going to take from it and apply or learn or challenge ourselves. And it was just a joy and an honor. You all each have just exquisite careers and incredibly distinguished and in very, very different fields of STEM, which is phenomenal. So if people have questions after this panel, you can certainly get a hold of us. You can call Space Camp and find out more. We can get in touch with some of your questions. Or if you want to learn more about these different fields, radiology, math, space payloads, private sector, or space defense, this is kind of all the places where everything kind of starts to align is at Space Camp. There's always an alumni in the network that can either point you to that direction, help you answer a question, or point you to a resource where you can find out more. And so I want to invite you to do that. And of course, keep on asking the big questions. And if you are a woman who is going into the STEM field, we want to wish you the best of luck. You can do it. And all you have to do is ask how, right, Gretchen?
That's right.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for joining us tonight. We'll see you next time. And thank you again. Everyone, take care. Goodbye.